Hello, and welcome to the Miles on Repeat podcast. Today, we're doing our first ever in-person interview. I've got one of my good friends, Aubree Reichel, here with me. How are you doing, Aubree?
Doing all right. A little wet outside, but P&W Gothic at its finest.
Yeah, it's a Pacific Northwest spring day.
Yes.
Definitely. So I brought you on because, I know some of your story, but I think our listeners would be intrigued to know more of your story. So first, I'll start with just knowing what you do for a living outside of running first.
So I work in internet sales at a car dealership here locally. My brother is the marketing director, and he brought me on about 6 years ago, figuring I'd be doing well in that position, doing what I do, and he was right. It was a huge learning curve, but it's a solid schedule, and it works well with my running schedule with flexibility. Most days I don't go in until noon, and so I get my runs in the morning, and yeah.
So when did your whole running journey begin?
So I've always been an active person. Like as a kid, my parents were always signing us up for sports and activities, and I started running in cross country in high school as kind of a conditioning for soccer, kind of the soccer pipeline that everybody seems to follow in some way, shape, or form. So I was going to do volleyball until about a week before tryouts, and I realized I didn't know anybody on the team, and I didn't know the volleyball coach. And I was entering my sophomore year of high school, and I knew the cross country coach from my freshman year. I had had 3 classes with him, including our honors, history, and English classes, and he just loved running. And so that kind of was contagious. So I ran for 3 years and then played soccer in college for 3 seasons, but kind of still dabbled in some road races. And when I ran my first road half, I loved it. And so I went to our cross country coach at Indiana Tech, where I was going to school, and I was like, I want to do this instead. And so they were able to switch my scholarship, and I ran cross country and track for 2.5 years. So I was a junior academically, and so I was able to take a 5th year of college to use my eligibility. And my senior year of college, so my 5th year of college, I was introduced to trail running from a boyfriend at the time. His dad was super involved in the group that put on the Indiana Trail 100. And so he introduced me to that group, and just kind of gone from there. And moved back to Washington in 2018 and found the trails here are a lot more difficult than in Indiana, but they're still just as fun. And yeah, just a lot of trails. And
What events were you running back in like college and stuff?
in college, I was doing the 5K, 10K outdoor track, 3K, 5K indoor, and the NAIA actually does a marathon or half marathon depending on the year, and I tried to qualify for nationals in that, but I was off the B standard by 6 seconds, so I didn't quite make it.
Hey, it happens. Yeah. But you found trails.
I found trails, and they were way better.
When did you end up doing your first ultra then?
In December of 2013. So I was technically still doing college eligibility, and my now ex's dad was like, well, what do we want to get you for Christmas or your birthday? Or it was in the winter sometime. And it's like, well, why don't you just sign me up for this race? And so my first 50K was kind of on a whim. But with the college cross country season, I was already running like 60 miles a week, and I had just PR'd my half, which was I was off the provisional standard by 6 seconds. And so I had a good fitness base. I just took the 50K really easy, and it was just 2 16-mile loops, and the conditions were pretty good. It was around freezing, which in Indiana in winter is pretty good. And I ran it in a pair of Road Pegasus with 3/8-inch roofing screws in the bottom for traction. So, yeah, I had no idea anything about nutrition. I walked up to the aid station, was super overwhelmed by everything, grabbed some water, grabbed some Fig Newtons, and just that's what my first 50K was.
After that first 50K, how long was it before you eventually went back to ultras?
So that was December of 2013. I dabbled in road marathons, and I had ended up doing the Veterans Marathon in Columbia City, Indiana, where I BQ'd. And so I kind of focused on road marathons for a few years, but I still ran on trails a lot. But I didn't do my next ultra until 2017. So there was about 3 years that I didn't do ultras. I just did road marathons and got injured and recovered, and yeah, just played on the roads kind of.
Yeah. And you ran Boston though, didn't you?
Yeah, so I ran Boston in 2016 and 2019. And both years were really warm and sunny, which is not my forte. I would have probably thrived in 2018 when it was super windy and cold, and probably would have done a lot better. But it's an experience. I don't really have the desire to do it again because I have my sights set on Western States eventually. But I feel like I learned a lot from those training cycles.
Definitely. What is it about Western States that draws you to it?
The tradition and kind of the history behind the event. I've known people who have both done the event and volunteered. I went to the lottery with Justin, my boyfriend, who also is trying to get into Western States, when we were down in Sacramento for CIM a few years ago. And we were able to go to the lottery, and just the excitement in the area of Auburn and the community. And my sister lives in that area too, and I've run some of the trails, and like there's just so much electricity behind it, and there's just nothing in my maybe I'm building it up, maybe I'm underselling it, I don't know. I just want to find out. Just, it excites me to the point where I will continue to train and work hard with that goal in mind to hopefully do it one day.
Definitely. Is that kind of why you focus a lot on those Western States qualifiers then?
Yeah, I did my first 100 at Indiana Trail in 2021, and I admit I did not enjoy the 100-mile distance. So since then, my qualifiers have been 100Ks, but they still count. And so I hope with Western States and any other 100 I do, I hope I'm able to learn from my experience from Indiana as my first one and hopefully enjoy it more.
What can you tell me a little bit about what happened at Indiana Trail 100 for you?
I can't even pinpoint exactly why I didn't like it. And I don't know if it's because I set my expectations too high and my goals too high, that once they got out of reach, I was just frustrated the rest of the time, which having high standards for myself is kind of a double-edged sword in that regard. The conditions that year were also very warm. It was in the 70s in October and really humid. I lost a lot of time because I prioritized changing clothes and to keep from hypothermia once it got dark, and just feeling comfortable in the sense that I didn't want my clothes to be why I had issues. So like any sort of chafing issues, just feeling tired and sweaty and gross, and you put on a pair or a set of new clothes and you're like, okay, I feel rejuvenated. But that costs time. I think just my lower intensity foundation, so like a lot of zone 2, zone 3, I've lacked in the past. I've always run probably easy runs a little too hard. I could have used a lot more strength training in preparation for that race. So there's a lot of little things that I think I did not adequately prepare for. But I also didn't really know what to expect for my first 100, since it's a huge undertaking and anything can go wrong, but nothing went majorly wrong, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. Do you think then that you've approached your 100Ks now differently because of what you learned at the Indiana Trail 100?
Yeah, I'd actually DNF'd 100K before my 100 miler at Black Canyon, but that was some overuse and soft tissue injuries that I dealt with about a week before the race. And then once the race came, I dealt with some GI issues. I was dealing with a hamstring issue. So I learned a lot from that training cycle as well for my first Black Canyon in 2021. And then since then, I think because I know I can go the distance, the 100Ks are a little bit easier to approach for me, even though Gorge Waterfalls 100K has about 11 to 12,000 feet of climbing. My 100 miler only had 8. And then I'm preparing for Waldo 100K in August, which also has about 11 to 12,000 feet of climbing. So it's different preparation, which I think the trails that I train on here are more conducive to success on those. Because even at Black Canyon last year in 2024, the issues that I experienced there were more nutrition and the result of the delay that happened during the race and the mud on the first 7 miles of the course, which you can't control. You just kind of have to adapt and take what the day gives you. And that's part of the appeal for me for a lot of these races is having to troubleshoot those things as they come up. And so every single race where something happens, something different that I've never encountered before, it's just different tools in the toolbox to when something goes wrong, you have the tool. Oh, this happened before and this is what worked. Or you rely on others' expertise and you come to an aid station like, oh, I'm dealing with nausea. Okay, well, here's some chicken broth and here's some alcohol wipes. I've heard if you smell they use that'll help. And it's like, oh, I'll try anything at that point. Yeah, having Western states as the end goal for now kind of gives me direction to the races that I'll sign up for, and having so many options in the Pacific Northwest of having Gorge Waterfalls, having Waldo. I did go to do Black Canyon, which was a lot of fun because Arizona is manageable in the winter. Again, don't do heat well. I lucked out there. And then being able to train on similar terrain as what I'll be racing on is also very handy. So, yeah.
Have you said kind of you run some trails down in the area of where Western States is, or?
Yeah, so in 2020, the weekend before everything shut down from COVID, I did Pioneer Spirit 50 miler, which starts in the area of Cool, which doesn't go, I don't think Western States goes through that area, but like Formidable 50K, and there's some other big races from the Auburn area that utilize the same trail systems. But some of it was on the Western States Trail and on No Hands Bridge. And so, yeah, I've been in that area a few times. And that was a big race for me from the standpoint of not only was it the last race before the world shut down, it was also a USATF championship race that I finished top 10 and felt very validated in the work that I did. And it was a lot harder than what I had expected because, again, I had never done a 50 miler with more than 4,000 feet of climbing because of Indiana. And we very much underestimated the course. And I say we as in like some of my teammates and my coach. And because for the 2,000 foot climbs in the first half, the second half of the race looked pretty flat, but they were not. It kind of goes into the area around Folsom Lake where there's another race that goes through there that I can't remember. I can't recall the name of the race. It's in November. The Rio de Lago that goes through there, maybe. That one's in the Folsom area too. They're not flat. Those trails were not flat. They were very bouldery, and it was raining and 50 degrees, and that was a rough day for a lot of people. Like, I remember Matt Daniels DNF'd. That was like the big one, especially like for sponsored athletes to deal with those kinds of things. It was new for me to learn. I'm just like, oh, even they have bad days. But yeah, the trails there are super fun, and so just the hoopla around the race also seems like the whole energy around Western States just seems like so much fun.
How did the trails that you ran down there compare to like what we have accessible here?
Pretty similar. This is going on 5 years ago, so it's hard to remember since I haven't trained on those. It's hard to compute. I would say it's pretty similar to what you'd see at like Capitol Forest or in parts of Tiger Mountain. The bouldery bits are probably similar to Middle Fork, Snoqualmie. Um, but again, I've only been on there once, but I remember that running fairly slow just because of the weird steps and boulders, and like it was not necessarily smooth terrain. So yeah.
So you feel like if you do get drawn one day, it'll be pretty easy to
I
train for
think
it.
so. The hardest part, I think, would just be to mimic conditions, and that's where a lot of heat adaptations, sauna work, those kinds of things are going to be super important. That luckily I haven't had to worry about yet. That's just another that'll come eventually. I need to hone in on a lot of other things before I worry about heat.
So you didn't do any like sauna work for your races at Black Canyon or anything?
No, I didn't really think about it at the time. Some of it was probably me being naive and hoping for the best. The first year, I think it was like in the 60s, and so that was fine. It was sunny. And then the second year was, so 2021 was in the 60s, 2024, I think the highs only got in the 50s. And it was like super warm. It wasn't warm, super sunny and exposed. But as far as the conditions and the temperatures were perfect for me. We just ran into the issue of freezing temperatures at the start with threats of black ice. There was snow in the first 7 miles, so it was like super muddy. After the first aid station, it was a lot better. The trails dried out and they were perfect. But because of the 2.5 hour delay, my nutrition strategy was messed up, and I wasn't able to get that wrangled back in. And for a little bit, ran into some nausea issues for the first time ever around mile 40. And there's my kitty.
It's okay.
So yeah, Black Canyon, I think I've had the most kind of troubleshooting things. Just in regard to with it being 100K distance, which is significant, but shorter than 100, you can really bounce back with enough time to like still get under cutoffs. So I walked about 10 miles, just having to deal with the nausea and still trying to eat, but it ended up just slowing my pace so much. But in hindsight, it's like, okay, I can deal with that. I can figure that out. So like all these instances are just kind of, like I said, tools, building blocks to just keep getting better. And I feel like you can kind of do that with road marathons, but road marathons just go by so fast that once something goes wrong, there's no kind of redemption. You can and when I've hit the wall in road marathons, it's you just kind of walk it in. You got like 5 or 6 miles left. You can do that on a bad day, an hour to an hour and a half. So it's like you just count down, like, okay, this is fine. It's just not my day. It's just not going to be the best finishing time. But I feel like with trail and ultra, it's just a finish is considered a success more so than marathon. Not that marathons isn't a success. I don't want to like try gatekeeping anything.
Okay. So your first time running Black Canyon, did you have nutritional issues as well? Was that something that was going on?
That one's hard to say because my period started that morning, and I don't know how much of it was in regard to that. I didn't have nausea issues. I just had to duck behind the bushes between aid stations, and I feel like that was starting to affect like being able to safely navigate the course and hold in hydration, and I just did not feel safe in a way. I felt like eventually I would become a liability, and I was tripping over rocks toward the halfway point. Um, so I didn't have nausea or nutritional issues in that regard, but the best I could figure out was possibly the water. Like desert water has a lot more like treated chemicals, and so I don't know if that impacted me. So that does remain a mystery, and but I think I just the day, because I didn't have any of the same kind of water issues, or what I consider water issues. I didn't have the same GI issues the second time around.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if it was maybe a common factor at Black Canyon for you.
No, different things, different years.
Do you have any plans to go back
I
there?
do. I can do so much better on that course. And even though it didn't go well in my definition of it, the event is like, I had so much fun. I was watching the live stream this year and I got mad FOMO. Like, I wanted to be there. I was so sad. It's like a year ago I was there and I want to be back, and everyone had a good day. And a friend of mine I think finished like 24th female. So she had a really good day. And so being able to cheer for everybody, I wouldn't be able to do that on the course if I were there. But yeah, it just looked, it's just a fun event. It's a big deal. It's one of the bigger races as far as ultras go, with over 1,000 people registered every year. The course is fun. It has its challenges. The distance is challenging. There are some climbs that are very similar to where the hills are situated in the Boston Marathon course. And like what makes the Boston Marathon course challenging isn't necessarily the length of the climbs, it's where the hills are situated. And I feel like it's very similar in Black Canyon, where you have this huge, long, gradual descent in the first 20 miles. And then the hills and climbs in the second half aren't particularly big, especially by ultra standards. But if your strategy is off, then those can seem way bigger than they actually are. And I think being able to now have seen the whole course, and after I was actually able to get some food in at mile 50, my last 12 miles were really good. But it's just trying to put together a complete race there. It's a good course and event to aim for a complete race. If that makes sense.
It makes sense. What kind of strategy would you say would be appropriate for that course then?
Just going out easier than expected, but keeping up on nutrition. I think my nutrition strategy, and with my reliance on Spring Awesome Sauce at a bad time for the company, I think my nutrition strategy would have to be the biggest factor that I would really really have to work on when I do it next. Trying to figure out what works best in regard to carrying gels and carrying carbs, liquid carbs versus solid food. With a 100-miler at Indiana, I would roll up to an aid station and look at the fare in front of me on the table and be like, oh, this looks good. I'll eat that. and I would have gels and other stuff with me that I would eat at prescribed intervals. But because you're running at a lower intensity, you can have a little more flexibility with solid foods, with, oh, this does not taste good right now, let's try this instead. A lot more trial and error for the moment. Whereas Black Canyon, you are going a little bit faster, a little bit higher intensity, especially in the first half, where you drop to 3,000 feet in the first 20 miles. It's really fun, but it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room in regard to your nutrition strategies. You really have to be on it. So yeah, since then I've been playing around with a lot more. I'm gone back to goo, because goo seems to go down well pretty regularly. I've tried a lot of different high carb hydration and electrolyte drinks, and just really trying to broaden what will work. I do have an appointment with a registered dietitian in a couple weeks, and I hope to work through that with her as well, of trying to figure out like what kind of nutrition strategy would work best for me in regard to carb content. So instead of Fig Newtons and water, which worked for my first 50K, it's now a lot more specific on what'll work, or what I hope will work. So again, a lot more tools for the toolbox.
I feel like we're just kind of endlessly learning. And I feel like in this last year, you've kind of had some things where you've had to pivot and learn from.
Yeah. After Black Canyon last year, I got my Western States qualifier, which was the big thing. And then it was like I was going to do some more sub ultra stuff. And so I signed up for Y East Trail Fest, which is near Mount Hood. And it was a little bit at altitude. I think most of it is like 6,000 feet. It went up to 8,000. So I knew it was going to be challenging from that regard. And it had a huge 1,500-foot climb in a mile and a half that I was not super excited about, but it was just about putting myself in a situation where I had to be uncomfortable. And I knew that going in. I didn't realize how challenging it would be, especially since I was coming down from that 1,500-foot climb. I hit a rock and smashed my kneecap, which completely derailed the rest of my race. I finished, but it was not the result that I expected, anticipated, or ever thought I would finish. I was in the bottom 50% of the results for the first time in a long time for me. And I kind of just felt kind of burnt out after that. I still had running plans. I went to Indiana for a weekend and ran at Chain of Lakes with the Indiana Trail Running Group, and I was still active. And then I jumped in and did Defiance 30K, which is about 20 miles, a little over a 30K. And that actually went really well. I had so much fun. I run the trails at Point Defiance all the time, so I'm super familiar with that course. And I was like super excited. I was signed up for Deception Pass 50K or 25K in December. I was feeling really good again. I was doing workouts. I was healthy. And then a week after Defiance, I was running in Puyallup downtown, and I smashed my ankle on a sidewalk. Well, I came down and my foot just fell off the sidewalk and ended up with a really bad grade 2 ankle sprain, which I kept trying to run on it. I was very optimistic. I was like, oh, well, I just have to stress it a little bit and it'll be fine. And after a month of that, it still hurt way too bad. I didn't want to cause any additional damage. So I took 2 weeks off in December and just cross-trained. And it's been a very cautious process coming back. I'm finally above 30 miles a week consistently. I'm taking 1 day off a week, which I had not done that in a long time, like regularly. My rest days used to be just as needed whenever I wanted to, if I was super tired from work. So now it's like every Thursday, I have an 11-hour work day. It's my rest day. I don't do anything for running. I work with my physical therapist once a month as far as like in-person stuff, but I've been working with her for about a year and a half now. And so this is like the first injury that we're navigating together. And between her strength program, her rehab program, she has a mobility program for me, and it's all tailored to me, which has been so helpful. And it's still challenging because we're November, December, January, February, March. So we're 5 months post sprain, and I still can't run normally on trails. Even with my ankle taped up, it still ends up feeling really unstable. So that part's frustrating, but having to trust the process, it's a lesson in patience for me. And when my PT said, yeah, just trust the process, it's okay. Thanks. I hate it. It is so frustrating to have felt good again. I'm grateful that it was in the winter. It gave me an opportunity to really step back, reevaluate my goals, and also facilitate friendships that are often neglected with how much time we spend running. So I did a lot of coffee dates, a lot of just, I think, just had people over quite a bit. We did trivia again fairly regularly. And so being able to kind of lean on others to get through that was really helpful. And just thinking back to 6 years ago before I moved back here, that would have been absolutely devastating for me. And so just even to reflect on the progress that I've made emotionally and mentally in my mental health it's been a good reminder of the growth that I've seen in myself. Even though it was just a stupid ankle sprain and just trying to just cursing at it every time it hurts and it can stop hurting. Not that it still hurts now, but I ran Pipeline Trail yesterday, which is a mixture of kind of dirt, pavement, and some loose gravel. And that instability is still kind of iffy at times. And I know that's what it needs to heal. But it's still trying to find that line of how much is too much, and stressing it to heal and stressing it to have it adapt to the additional stress that I'm going to put on it over the next few months. And we're still seeing progress. But yeah, it has required a lot of pivoting to try to get back to where I want to be.
Were you already doing the strength mobility work prior to the ankle sprain, or was that something that came more after?
I had done some strength training. Every time I would go see Dr. Mary, we'd revamp it a little bit as far as like different circuits, different things to incorporate. If I get bored with a program, I'll just let her know and she'll revamp it. But typically, I try to do 1 day of strength per week, and it coincides with my workout day. So it's on so I have it on Wednesdays. I'll do my workout in the morning, and then I would strength train in the evening. And it was the injury. I was doing a lot of that stuff before the injury, but the injury, because I wasn't running, it left more time to do those things, to try to establish a mobility, especially mobility, and rolling out regularly, and stuff that seemed unnecessary because I wasn't running, but just trying to get in the habit of it. And so trying to keep that going of doing mobility on Mondays and strength training on Wednesdays, and the supplemental rehab exercises on either Mondays or Fridays or both. Or yeah, trying to keep those is going to be the biggest challenge, I think. Because it's so easy just to, I don't need to do that, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll have time to do that tomorrow. Rinse and repeat.
Have you noticed a difference implementing those in your running at all since you've gotten back to it?
Somewhat. I think I've taken a lot of like kind of a step back in trying to really keep my easy days easy and doing a lot more heart rate based training, and just trying to keep my ankle happy, because that's what I noticed when I did start running again back from the injury, was the higher intensity stuff was what gave me the most issues. Even on running on the track or running on the road, it was the higher intensity stuff. So definitely trying to keep my gait pretty even between right and left side, and really trying to keep the intensity more aerobic instead of like if I run with somebody else like Ruth or my friends that are faster than me, and I'm like, yeah, I can keep up, but energy systems being used are not appropriate for the day. Um, so I think my mentality around running, like it's hard for me to gauge where my fitness is at right now because I'm not because I am coming back. And so right now we're being pretty cautious, and like I've done 200-meter repeats or 1 minute repeats or 45-second hills, a lot more shorter stuff that I've been faster at in the past. And so I think once I kind of get back to like the fitness level I was at before, I'll start to notice more of the benefits of the strength training than I have before. But I mean, before Defiance, I felt a lot stronger, and before the ankle issue, I was able to climb up to Camp Mirror, which was a big deal to me because it's 10,000 feet. And it's never been that high. And step one for my long term goal of summiting Mount Rainier. And that was hard because I don't hike much. I try to find runnable trails. I love runnable trails, but trying to hike up 4,000 feet in 4.5 miles was a challenge. So yeah, I think the strength training is definitely beneficial in regard to keeping me healthy, um, minus the traumatic injuries like falls or sprains, which are annoying. But um, yeah, and I just got a trap bar for deadlifts. So I basically am like scouring Facebook Marketplace for all these little weightlifting things to add to my home gym. And it's just like, oh, here's a new toy. Let's go play with it. Look at my toy. Look what I can do. Stuff up and put it back down again. um, yeah. So just strength training, I feel like is super important when you're trying to navigate the long sustained climbs. And I think it was super valuable in that after I got my nausea under control at Black Canyon last year, my legs still felt like they had strength left in them that I was able to then knock out 12, 13-minute miles in the last 10 miles of a 62-mile race, which doesn't sound like super impressive, but trust me, it felt really good.
Well, I think it's impressive. Do you think, since you've had to train more aerobically now, do you think that changes anything moving forward when you're getting into a race, like your mindset going into it? Because I know you're pretty competitive.
I've had to kind of try to let go of some of that competitive nature because in a race like Waldo, where the field is going to be 200 people or less, I'm really only concentrating on the kind of the female. I do have the goal of podium finishing, but you have Amelia Boone who's going to be there, and she has a super impressive resume, and she's getting back to being healthy again. And I know Amber Singh, who runs out of Klamath Falls, is really involved in their local running club down there, and so she's put up some really impressive times in the past. And so those are kind of the two that I'm most familiar with as far as who else is in the field. but I'm overall trying to set my mindset of just being excited to go to the event and just being excited to be on the trails because it is on the PCT. My friend Calvin is running it too. My friend Rachel is running it as well. And that's Rachel's big scary thing this year, that she just kind of put her name in the lottery kind of on a whim. And we have a cabin down there already set up. I'm excited about the like everything that's going to go on with it, that I feel like the race is just going to add to it. Like it's just going to be just a fun, I just get to go run these really pretty trails and just enjoy being out there. And so that's kind of where my mindset is at for training, is just trying to enjoy the process, which I don't think I've been able to do in some other races that I've put myself in. Like Gorge Waterfalls 100K is a pretty major race. It's a world championship qualifier this year. It wasn't 2 years ago when I ran it, but that day was, again, it was a really hard day. And a lot of it was conditions based. It was 40 degrees and rainy the whole time. That course does have quite a bit of road and pavement, but it also has a lot of mud when it was raining. So the conditions made that race a little bit harder for me to enjoy. And so I think the mental side of it also, it requires a lot of the troubleshooting of just being able to acknowledge, like, yes, I've been running for 8 hours. Yes, it's okay to be tired. How do we come out of this? Okay, I hate the world right now. Okay, that means I need to eat. And just being able to tune into how you're feeling emotionally to then acknowledge that it's an okay feeling, and what does that mean? And I recently listened to the audiobook for Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus, and he talks about that too, of your mood and your emotions are also trying to tell you stuff. And so being able to tune into that and be able to troubleshoot, okay, this is how I feel. How do I come out of that? Because obviously when you're feeling good, you're running better. So the ups and downs are part of it, but how do you combat the downs, that when it does happen, how do you come out of that in regard to what you eat, or you give yourself a little treat like Sour Patch Kids or an oatmeal cream pie or a Red Bull or something that you don't normally eat but would just make you feel like this is fun again. So I'm trying to tune into a lot more of the mental side of it too, because I feel like I've gotten away from that a lot. I'm trying to perform at a certain level, and the pressure is just too much, especially since I'm not seeing the results that I want.
I think that's a good thing to like shift kind of your focus on it too. With Waldo 100K, I know in the past you've done some like scouting of courses before. Have you seen any of the course for Waldo?
I have not. On our way down to Rogue Gorge 50K in 2023, my friend Calvin and I did drive through there, but we took the PCT going the other way, and it was only a 3-mile run. So I've seen parts of the PCT, but with that course being 5.5 hours away, it's not really as feasible to get down there in the time between now and August with other stuff that we have going on. Justin signed up for San Diego 100, so we're going to go down in June for that. I'm hoping to either get time on that course too, or pacing, or just have fun. Julian is a lovely little mountain town, also on the PCT, just different sections. But yeah, no, I don't think I'll be able to get down there to see the course at all. So I'm just going to have to rely on some video scouting and the elevation profiles and just listening to stories from Steph and Calvin who have done it.
I think firsthand knowledge is probably the best for that, rather than just staring at a chart. Are you still working with the coach?
Yeah, so I've been working with my coach, Drew Wassman, since September of 2019. Um, he's given me a lot of the tools to structure a lot of my own training, and especially in regard to formatting easy runs and long runs. And at this point, he just gives me my workouts every week and go from there. After Y East Trail Fest last July, I kind of took a step back and it was just workouts once a week, and everything else was just kind of what I wanted or needed to do. And then the injury was Dr. Mary was prescribing everything as far as my cross training and getting back into running. So we kind of took a break with mental and physical injuries in such a way. But yeah, so still working with him. I like the system he uses is just a lot of easy runs, doubles when you get up to a certain mileage. Everything is based on time instead of mileage. So I just go out for a prescribed amount of time, or it doesn't matter what the mileage is. As I get faster and more efficient, my running, obviously the mileage will reflect that. If I don't feel as good, I can always cut it short. It gives me a lot of autonomy in his system. So I've really enjoyed working with him.
So at this point, do you kind of like co-coach yourself then?
Yeah, which is kind of the design of, I feel like what a good coach can do is give you the tools to make the decisions for yourself as far as flexibility and how you feel. Especially with him being remote, he lives in Nebraska now, and so he very much has to rely on how I feel and being open and honest about it. And when I first started working with him, I was really grateful for the fact that I didn't know him before. He didn't know my running before. I've had coaches where they were friends first, and that kind of presented some challenges as far as trying to, I guess, impress them in so many ways. And so coming in fresh with somebody where I don't get extra credit if I run faster than prescribed, I don't get extra credit for running more than prescribed. Less was more. I think it was the first time a coach had ever given me positive affirmation when I started doing a workout and the interval energy was like not there. So I just bailed on my second rep out of like 6 and was like, okay, well, we're just going to run home now. And he was like, that was a good decision. I wish more people would make decisions like that. And so just being able to trust myself to make decisions like that too. I'm not at the point where I prescribe myself workouts, but I could probably just go back to previous training cycles, look at what I did, and probably replicate that and still do well. Um, but he's very kind of blue collar. You do the work, no nothing fancy, no double thresholds, no um, nothing more than needs to be done. You just put in the work and you'll get the results. And so, yeah, I can just think of instances where technology gets in the way of things. Or I think I had a workout like last year where my GPS just went haywire after I'd started the workout. And it's like, this is not the pace that I was supposed to, this is not the pace I'm running. So I just switched it to a different screen, ran for a certain amount of time at the effort that I was supposed to run, and just mapped it out afterwards, kind of old school. Like, I'm sure if I lost my GPS watch and just went back to his little Casio smartwatch, he'd be perfectly happy without knowing like how far, how fast. It's just all about how long and how did you feel. And so I think it kind of coincides with how I'm approaching this year of like less is more. And like last week I ran at the nature center in Tacoma and my heart rate was at 150 or less, and it's dirt trail with some hills, not a lot, but finished my run at a solid 10.5 minute pace, which is slower than I usually go on easy days on the road or in the past of what I've tried to do. And my concern was, what if Strava thinks I'm slow now? Nobody cares. The reality is, like, you can put your stuff on Strava, but we should be positively affirming the slower, easier runs at the effort that they should be, not the faster runs that are everything is a recovery run, even if it's 7-minute pace, which for some people are recovery runs, but very small percentage people should be doing their recovery runs at 7-minute pace. But yeah.
With him giving you the autonomy to kind of schedule your own runs and stuff like that, does he ever check, like, to see what you've done and been like, that doesn't look like an easy heart rate or anything like that? Do you set parameters? Or
not necessarily heart rate stuff specifically, none of the metrics like that. It's all like qualitative. Like during my build for CIM in 2022, we ran into the issue here of having almost 2 months straight of wildfire smoke. And so we had to kind of get creative with that, of getting on the treadmill. And then I had a really hard time honing in on what my marathon effort and a tempo pace was. I was running them like, this is what I think I should be running, which was too fast. And so I would be prescribed a 10 to 12 mile tempo run at marathon effort, and I'd get to 6 miles and completely blow up. And so he went back and looked at my log and was like, okay, well, you did this. You were supposed to go an easy run this day, but you ended up running faster. So you basically just tried to put on too many workouts or too many hard efforts. And so in that regard, like, the log that we keep is really helpful, because I do get pretty detailed in my explanations of, this is what I did, this is how I did it. And that's separate from Strava. That's on a Google sheet that we just update and just put all the notes in. And if he has questions, then he texts me. And then, but that was an example of running too hard. And then he was able to go back and look and pinpoint, this is why, like, your effort was too hard this day, so you weren't able to be recovered for today. So, yeah.
So beyond Waldo 100K, it sounds like you're figuring out nutrition, you're kind of implementing more strength mobility, changing the mindset with running. Do you have anything that you're looking forward beyond that?
Western States Lottery. So I haven't really signed up for anything. I do have a credit for a rain shadow running event, so I'll probably jump in and do Deception Pass 25K, because I wasn't able to do that last year. The 50K there was my first ultra in Washington. Well, I had done the Carkeek event in the fall, but that was technically an ultra distance, but it was a training run, so it doesn't really count. Kind of. Beyond that, I'm not sure, because I still have to figure out what next year will look like. My mom and I are going on a cruise in the summer, so we're gonna have to allocate a lot of PTO for that. So that's kind of the big thing that I'm looking forward to, not running related, is in 2026 going on the cruise, because my mom doesn't get a chance to get out much, and my dad didn't want to go on a cruise.
So you get to go on the cruise.
So I get to go on a Viking cruise around Iceland and Norway, and I'll be the youngest person there by like 3 decades, and it'll be fun. And so even not race related, it is nice that Western States does have the option of skipping a year and you don't lose your tickets. I may take advantage of that depending on how the lottery goes. With some of the early season stuff like Gorge Waterfalls and Black Canyon, probably Canyons too down in Auburn, you really have to sign up for them before the Western States Lottery even happens. So you're having to plan a lot of these races well in advance, with the possibility that you'll have to do Western State. You don't have to, with the idea that you'll get into the Western States Lottery. So then that takes up, that's 2 races. But yeah, I don't know what Beyond Waldo looks like quite yet. I do want, there's some non-race things that I want to do, like through hike Lewitt and through hike Timberline around Mount Hood and some other non-race stuff that I think would be a lot of fun. So I don't know. The racing takes a lot out of me as far as mental and physically, because I do try to run them as best I can, which kind of leaves me out of commission for 2-3 weeks after races. Justin's also signed up for Mountain Lakes, so I'll probably go down and crew that. So yeah, fun stuff. I just need to get healthy, fully healthy again.
I think you're on the right path.
Yeah.
For ultra distance, is there any gear that you are in love with right now?
I haven't really. I mean, I always love my Solomon vest. Just the amount of capacity it stores. I have the Advanced Skin 12. I can fit so much stuff. I've done, let's see, 2/3 of the Wonderland were with that vest. So I did the 24-mile section from Mowich to White River, and then White River down to Longmire. And so just being able to have like a bladder and my 2 bottles and pack all my any sort of extra clothes and all the 10 essentials and everything like that just fits in a vest, and it adds weight, but it doesn't feel heavy once it's fully loaded. So I think that's like my favorite piece of gear. For shorter runs, I have an Ultimate Direction comfort belt, which kind of sits flat, similar to a flip belt. It just doesn't have like the zipper. It's just kind of like pockets all the way around that are segmented. I've used those in some 50K races too. Having a Nathan handheld with the Comfort Direction, or the Ultimate Direction comfort belt. Ooh, and pockets. The Rabbit Smash'ems have pockets around the waistline, which are also really handy. Just storing a bunch of gels and nutrition. So yeah, those are kind of, it's all about storage. It's all about how much can I pack without having to leave a drop bag somewhere.
The more storage, the better.
Pockets. Women just want pockets.
It's true. That's all we ask for.
That's all we
and
want.
We get very little ones. But, you know, what do you do?
We're getting there. We're getting there. More stuff has pockets now, but like more pockets.
More pockets. That's what we're asking you, running companies, is for more pockets. Also, a question I like to ask everybody on the show: is there anybody in particular that really inspires you in the running world that you think would be a good fit on our show?
Calvin and Steph are kind of my like favorite runner people, just because they're so, I don't know, I've shared a lot of miles with them, and Calvin's so smart, Steph's so smart and well traveled, and like they're just my favorite people.
Well, I know who Calvin is. I don't think I know who Steph is, but
Steph Decker, she lives over in Bremerton. She did Waldo last year. She signed up for High Lonesome.
Oh, nice.
In Colorado. Yeah.
That's a heck of a race.
Steph's done a lot more FKT type stuff.
Okay.
When like she just, or just long distance route finds and adventure runs and like the I don't know what some of the routes, and she loves the Olympics. Her and Phyllis Stanley did 100K starting from Dosey Wallops last like Labor Day weekend, and ended up finishing up at Deer Park. And the goal was to go from Deer Park and like loop around and end up back down at Dosey, but yeah, that didn't. A lot of stuff went wrong that day for them with all the it was really hot that weekend. But yeah, Steph loves to just route find and do adventure runs. And Calvin's just super supportive of her, so I love it.
I love that. I'm gonna have to check out who Steph is too. Can you also let our listeners know where they can follow your journey to Waldo 100K this year?
I'm on Strava, and I'm on Instagram as Aubree Reichel, and that's kind of where I update most.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about
Thanks
your
for
journey.
having me.
Yes, thank you
This
so
was
much.
fun.
And thank you all for tuning in for this episode of Miles on Repeat podcast. Please like, share, and follow wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, happy trails, guys.